All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the People for Bikes virtual education series. Today, we are doing our policy roundup for July 2025. We are about three-fourths the way done with state legislative sessions across the country. While there's some things still in progress, the dust has settled on a lot of legislative sessions. So today, we are going to take you through what all went down so far in 2025 and what that means for you all. So I'm Noah Maturko. I'm our Senior Manager of State and Local Policy here at People for Bikes. We'll be joined by Matt Moore, our General and Policy Counsel here at People for Bikes. So here's a brief overview of our agenda. Most of you are probably very familiar with People for Bikes, but we'll go through exactly how our policy work serves our greater mission of making the US the best place in the world to bike, and also the resources we have to serve you, our members. And then we'll go through our top line legislative work at the state and municipal level so far in 2025. These will be bills that directly affect both bike business and infrastructure. Our bike business areas are the ones that either create new opportunities for revenue for the industry or where we oppose harmful proposals that would have disrupted the market or added costly new burdens to bike business. And we'll have time for questions and answers at the end of our presentation. So in the meantime, you can drop those in the chat with the Q&A box. And since we're working with state legislative sessions in this particular webinar, we're not going to talk much about or at all about things like tariffs or what's happening at the federal level, but of course, we're always a resource for those issues as well. So, People for Bikes, we're the trade association for you all, the US bicycle industry. Our big audacious goal is to make the US the best place in the world to ride a bike. We represent over 320 manufacturer members who are selling bikes and e-bikes in the US, as well as producing components. These are big brand names, small brand names, and everybody in between. We also represent thousands of retail locations across the US who sell these brands through their brick and mortar locations. As well as our manufacturer and retail members, we also represent what we call the People for Bike Army. That's 1.4 million riders who are signed up on our email list, who are signed up to be advocates, to make comments, and to participate and create that rider voice as a part of our messaging and our policy work. While our focus today will be a lot on e-bikes and e-bike related policy, of course, another one of our focus is infrastructure, specifically creating safe, connected, and protected infrastructure. We have a program called our Great Bicycle Infrastructure Project that's working to build out projects across the country constantly, and we'll dive a little bit more into that. So we have three pillars of our organization around advocacy and our initiative work. This includes infrastructure, policy, and participation. I just mentioned infrastructure. We focus on policy at every level of government. And like I mentioned, today will be a lot of state and municipal level. And finally, we do a lot of work on participation, better understanding who is riding, how they're riding, and how we can create better and more equitable access for more folks to get on bikes. People for Bikes offers a multitude of resources to help support advocacy efforts. We have our new city ratings, which just dropped a couple of weeks ago for 2025. This program measures bike infrastructure networks around the country and outlines progress made, lessons learned, and how to implement policies that accelerate the construction of safe and connected infrastructure that can improve those scores. We also have a repository of data that outlines the benefits of bike infrastructure, participation insights, and more information to help your local advocacy efforts. And finally, what we're doing here today is really related to our work tracking federal, state, and local policy, sending out action alerts to you, sending out form letters to you to help get you involved. Of course, we do our fly-ins, we do meet and greets. Those are all things to help move the needle on our policy tracking. So as the trade association for the US, we offer our members a variety of resources to support your businesses, including participation in consumer insights, support related to trade and tariff, supply chain, sustainability compliance, among many other issues. And now 2025 by the numbers. So this was a big year for us. We tracked more bills this year and we engaged on more bills this year than we ever have in the past. This year so far, we've defeated bills that would have banned electric bikes from trail systems and public lands, defeated bills that would have mandated insurance registration or licensing for e-bike riders, and defeated bills that would have imposed expensive, unnecessary battery labeling and certification rules. We've saved the industry tens of millions of dollars by working to prevent costly market disruptions brought on through these potential bills, protect millions in lost revenue, and we've also helped to create new opportunities for future growth. So that 800, that's a lot. What does that look like? We meet with lawmakers, we meet with coalition members in those states, we send in letters, we recommend language to improve bills, we meet with legislative staff, we meet with folks in state agencies. This year, we've worked in 45 states and DC and many, many municipalities. In addition to our government affairs team here at People for Bikes, we have lobby teams on the ground in New York, New Jersey, California, and Illinois to help us do this work. So now I'll discuss some of the priorities that we've worked on in 2025. And we only have 45 minutes, so we won't be able to touch on every single bill. So if you had anything in mind that we don't touch on, you can drop it in the chat or we can talk another time. But we want to focus on the top line, important ones in each issue area, and how those point to larger trends that we're addressing. So these are state and local priorities. The bulk of our work this year has been on bike business while we continue to advocate for improved infrastructure and funding to improve bike access through our GBIC program. So the e-bike access and bike business, these are the bills that would either create barriers to selling to e-bikes. They would create new opportunities for revenue through incentives, things that we all care about, like battery safety and making sure that those bills are done the right way. And of course, fighting undue burdens like registration, licensing, insurance. And then our GBIP, our Great Bicycle Infrastructure Project, making sure we're getting dedicated funding, we're working on complete streets mandates, and making sure those streets overall are as safe as possible for riders, but also for pedestrians and for people driving as well. So now I'm going to pass it off to Matt to get us going.
Thank you, and hello, welcome everyone to this webinar. Well, let's talk about e-bikes, because many of those 800 bills we tracked were ideas from state legislators about how to regulate e-bikes. This, I think, was a pretty predictable response to your success in popularizing electric bicycles and selling them to consumers. So congratulations, your efforts were noticed. So first, we have a few states, remaining states that had not yet adopted People for Bikes 3-class definitional system for regulating electric bicycles. This year, North Carolina and Connecticut both had bills that were passed to adopt the 3-class system. Connecticut also clarified that devices that can go more than 20 miles per hour or have motors greater than 750 watts are not electric bicycles. It's been an important aspect of some of our work. Then Connecticut and Colorado also adopted limitations on advertising. These laws make clear that you cannot advertise a product that is not an electric bicycle as an electric bicycle or an e-bike, or use confusing language. If you do that, you need to have a disclaimer to consumers that specifically tells them what sort of vehicle they're actually buying and that it is not an electric bicycle. So we now have 4 states, including Utah and Minnesota, that have these provisions in their state law, and not complying with those with those requirements as a retailer or advertiser really constitutes a consumer fraud. You're selling someone a product that telling them it's electric bicycle and it's not. This is starting to have some real world results. We're starting to see devices we're referring to as e-motos. We're starting to see them advertised more and more as electric dirt bikes rather than electric bicycles, which is at least truthful, even if many of these devices wind up being used on public streets and in bike lanes. Next slide, please. Thank you. California has always seen a number of bill introductions focused on e-bikes, in many cases sponsored by local advocates who are trying to address issues that they're seeing. The bills this year especially SB 455, really kind of came on the heels of last year's SB 1271, which redefined Class 3 electric bicycles to exclude devices that have throttles, essentially banning throttles on e-bikes sold after January 1st of this year. When we saw this bill, we started working with local advocates and legislative staff to really shift the focus away from regulating electric bicycles. We feel they're heavily regulated already, towards regulating e-motos, which we feel are the cause of most of the public safety concerns that legislators and city officials are trying to address. So there were three separate sets of amendments to SB 455 through the process in the California Senate. It eventually passed the Senate and was sent over to the Assembly, but there were still remaining issues with the bill. It wasn't ready. We didn't have our full support. So the bill did stall out. It did not pass the Assembly, will not become law, but we think that was still a good result. As it stood, the bill would have required a different sort of e-bike class label than is used in all the other states. It would have required some information like the name and address of the actual manufacturer factory that made the product. The making the label getting to be pretty large and by default really requiring different labeling in every other state, because you don't want to have just a California product. But worse, the bill would have required manufacturers to notify customers who had bought a class 3 bike with a throttle that that device was no longer considered to be a class 3 e-bike in California. And we had some problems with that. You know, first, the SB 1271 didn't really state that it was intended to be retroactive and ban all previously sold class 3 e-bikes that had throttles. It became effective January 1st of this year, and affects future sales. But it was not clear that the legislature intended to ban, hundreds of thousands of electric bicycles that were already purchased and in use. And secondly, we do have a First Amendment that prohibits the state government from requiring manufacturers to make affirmative statements about their product, except in defined circumstances like a tobacco or alcohol warning about a future effect. Making statements about a product that's already been sold is generally not allowed by courts under the First Amendment. So we oppose on that ground. Um, on the plus side, it did address e-motos by attempting to define a new class. I'll go back. We're still on the last slide. SB 455 did address e-motos by defining a class of low-speed mopeds, which was a new vehicle type, and it would have required the operator under 18 to have a motorcycle license. So essentially, you would have to be 16 years old, have a driver's license, and a motorcycle endorsement to operate a device that wasn't an electric bicycle. So that was kind of a good aspect of it. But when we're going to work certainly with advocates, the bill author, and legislative staff on a proposal next year uh, for similar legislation. I kind of think 2025 may go down as the year of the e-moto, as not only are they on the radar of local police and state legislators, but in some cases they're being tracked down by drones, and the operators issued citations. So, I've already used the term e-moto. Well, what is that? So an e-moto is basically a vehicle that may look like an electric bicycle in some respects and even be equipped with pedals, but it has a motor that exceeds 750 watts of power, and it can go faster than 20 miles per hour on motor power alone by use of that throttle. Typically, they are throttle-driven devices. Many of them are currently advertised as being Class 2 electric bicycles, but they do have the power and speed capability beyond the legal limits of a Class 2 electric bicycle. They're not Class 2 electric bicycles. Um, Typically, they'll have a mode switch, or they can be unlocked, and you have something that was sold as Class 2, but it is now definitely a motor vehicle. So in the past, we've referred to these devices as out of category e-bikes, but we think the term e-moto is really more accurate because they are motor vehicles. They're motorcycle-like or dirt bike-like in form factor. And OCEV is not a very catchy term. So we're actually shifting our terminology and refer to them as e-motos. So many of the issues with these products have arisen in California, and we did see numerous bills this year that were introduced to address their growing use and safety concerns, especially when they're used by youth. So one of these is California's SB 586. This actually does refer to these devices as e-motos and addresses their use off-road. So this bill defines an off-road electric motorcycle and requires that it be registered just like a gas-powered dirt bike is now. So if you want to use it on a California OHV trail, off-road motorcycle trail, you need to apply to the state Parks Department and get a sticker that registers your bike, and it's an annual requirement. So if you don't have a sticker, you might be cited for failure to register your off-road electric motorcycle. Now, the bill is limited to devices that do not have pedals. That is in the current definition in the bill. We really wanted to have some devices with pedals included because, again, they're being sold as off-road electric dirt bikes. They have pedals, and if that's the product that they are, that they should be included. This was a motorcycle organization bill, and the advocates for the bill really resisted our efforts that industry doesn't regard a device with pedals as being a motorcycle. So we still, I think, have some work to do to address on-road use of e-motos. I will say that SB 586, which is rare in California, is really a Democratic blue state dominated in the legislature in both houses by Democrats. And this was a Republican sponsored bill. But it unanimously passed all of the committees that heard the bill and is very likely to become law. So some progress has been made, I think, both with recognizing that these devices can be regulated as off-road motorcycles and really raising awareness of the issue. Like California, Hawaii has also seen an increase in e-moto use, especially by youth, and growing safety concerns. So PeopleForBikes worked with very effective state and local advocates in Hawaii on a number of bills. SB 745 was one of those. It would have defined a high-speed electric bicycle to distinguish it from an electric bicycle. And we weren't crazy about the terminology, but we did like the fact that they were making it a different sort of vehicle. Again, those are the characteristics: more than 750 watts of motor power, or able to go more than 20 miles per hour by use of the motor. And then Hawaii was taking a pretty dim view of e-motos being used on streets. So they actually included this high-speed electric bicycle within the definition of a motorcycle, which would have required registration, license of the operator, and insurance, and treating that product as the motor vehicle that it actually is. While SB 745 did not advance, some of the approaches taken by that bill were adopted in other bill in the Hawaii House. So HB 958 was really a fully developed e-moto bill. It also adopted the three-class system in Hawaii. Hawaii had not yet adopted the three-class. They're one of those holdout states that still had not adopted model legislation. So the bill would have adopted three-class. It also this this was a little hard to swallow. It would have prohibited stunt riding of electric bicycles, no wheelies. I don't know how the kids are going to learn how to wheelie, but they can't do it on the public road. And then it also would require adult supervision if a class 2 electric bicycle was operated by a person under age 14. So they're trying to address the issue of very young children using class 2 e-bikes and motorcycles, e-motos as well. This bill came up with a little slightly different definition for e-moto. With this high-speed electric device was a broader definition than SB 745, which focused on high-speed electric bicycles. That was our suggestion. We know that there are other devices, high-speed scooters, skateboards, one-wheel devices that are on the market right now, but can greatly exceed 20 miles per hour, even reaching highway speeds of up to 55 miles per hour that are currently not regulated whatsoever. And the legislator agreed that they should also address that problem before it grows, and would have banned those high-speed devices altogether from public roads and bike lanes. That would have forced e-motos to be registered as motorcycles to be lawfully used on public streets. Basically, recognizing that an e-moto is not doesn't meet the limitations on an electric bicycle. It's therefore a motor vehicle, should be regulated as such. While this bill didn't advance, it actually was passed by both houses of the legislature. It had broad support, but then the governor determined that he would veto the bill. So he announced that the veto was coming. He intended to veto it. And the concern was that the definition was too broad and could conceivably include electric vehicles, electric cars, even though the language specifically limited to 2 and 3 wheeled devices, or devices with less than 4 wheels, actually. Nevertheless, the governor did veto the bill after much work by the legislature and advocates. We will be continuing to work with advocates advocating for passage of similar legislation to fix the concerns that the governor pointed to this year, and really expect that bill to be passed by Hawaii and signed into law in 2026. So e-bike incentive bills, of course, this has been a focus for People for Bikes for several years now, and we've had pretty good success in getting states and cities to pass and fund incentive bills to help people buy electric bicycles, replace car trips, help people, lower income folks, with transportation alternatives. It was a little tougher sledding this year. The main reason being that a lot of states were facing budget deficits. There was a lot of COVID era funding for states, and they were running budget surpluses because of that. And then a lot of that federal government support has ended. Here, I'm in Minnesota, and here at our legislature, we passed a bill a couple of years ago. There was another year of funding left in the bill, and there were calls to really claw back the remaining funding and use it for other purposes, even though it was it was not a huge amount of money, but they were looking for all sources of revenue. We managed to fight off that approach, but the bill did get amended to focus more on lower income population, folks with disabilities that really needed support in buying those electric bicycles. So that's where we're at. We saved the funding there. So we've got, here are some bills in various states that advanced this year. Wisconsin, I think, still has a bill that's in process, was just recently introduced. Again, it would be focused on specifically helping low income taxpayers, citizens with buying electric bicycles, and offer an incentive for buying them for dependents as well. There are still 10 states and 20 municipalities that have e-bike incentive programs, and this will be an ongoing focus for us as we move forward next year with trying to get more states to adopt incentive programs. Battery safety. Uh, we've had really good success this year on battery safety. And I can try and address questions about, what's up with that federal battery bill and CPSC, if you like, put those in the comments. But at the state level, we saw a couple introductions this year. Um, Illinois, in particular, is a large state with this big market for bikes and electric bicycles, and this bill would have required certification to only UL 2849 and required a nationally recognized testing laboratory to certify that every electric bicycle sold in Illinois. Uh, we're opposed to that. We think the standards should be broader, and that the laboratories available to do the testing should be greater than three. There's only three NRTLs that actually do that certification currently. So we lobbied to change the language, and we were successful there. Working through our lobbyist, this bill language, as passed, SB 2247, conforms to New York law, New York state law, and California state law. So they have nearly identical requirements. You can use either UL 2849 or EN 15194, and you need to have your products certified, tested by a accredited laboratory, an ISO accredited independent laboratory. There is another bill that was recently introduced in Washington, D.C., along the lines of the original Illinois bill, and we are working to oppose and amend that bill as well. Florida, as tends to have a lot of inclement weather and flooding. And a legislator in the Miami area, who's also a captain in the fire department there, introduced a bill that would have required that e-mobility batteries be tested to the IPX7 water ingress standard. That's a pretty nerdy standard, but suffice it to say that is higher standard than is currently required in UL 2849. So even if you had designed and tested and certified your e-bike to UL 2849, you would have had to redo that if that bill has tested, redesign. This standard would require you to immerse your battery, I believe, 3 or a meter deep in water for 30 minutes. It's a very high standard versus the spray a lot of water on it standard, which is used in UL 2849. So we talked with the sponsor, pointed out that it would essentially ban, a broad swath of e-bikes from being sold in Florida, and very receptive to our input. This bill did not advance, as well as a sort of a partner bill, a parallel bill in the Florida Senate that would have required waterproofing and a removable battery, which, again, that is a feature of some bikes, but not all. And banning bikes that have in down tube or in frame tube batteries would not be a good result for our members. So we have successfully opposed those two bills. Then last, in one of those other New York bills, would have required retailers to maintain functional fire protection and suppression measures against lithium-ion battery fires. This is already a significant issue for retailers in New York City with the enforcement of their fire code. So we opposed this bill. There wasn't a companion bill in the assembly. But this would have really increased costs for local retailers in the state of New York, not just New York City. We think it should be up to retailers and their insurance companies to decide what sort of fire protection issues they should have. Registration and insurance. There's currently, I think, just one state, New Jersey, that requires registration uh, of and licensing, not insurance, of electric bicycles. That's New Jersey, and that's only for Class 3. So we're working on that issue. But in the meantime, New York has seen bills continuously over the last couple of sessions requiring registration or registration and license plates. Sometimes they throw in an insurance requirement as well. And we think that really burdens consumers. It would reduce sales of electric bicycles. And so we continue to oppose those measures. Um, there is a ordinance introduced and has been introduced for quite a while in New York City. I believe it was last year or maybe the year prior, but the city council there has been kind of sitting on this bill. It's called Priscilla's Law. It's named after an unfortunate victim of a crash with an electric bicycle. And that would require registration, insurance, a license plate essentially for every e-bike used in the city of New York. We're monitoring that bill, working with our lobbyist in New York City and keeping an eye on it. And we do not believe it's going to advance at any time soon. But we're standing ready to, and as I said, watching that as we do with many of our other bills. Hawaii, again, a couple more bills that didn't advance this year would have required registration, licensing, and insurance for at least some e-bikes. Those didn't advance through the legislature. And then there is a bill in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is another one of those famously very blue states. And this is a Republican sponsored bill. So we do not believe that Massachusetts will require registration, insurance, and a driver's license to operate an electric bicycle.
Great. Thanks so much, Matt. And we did have a question that we can circle back at the end, but that's about CPSC, bike battery safety regulations and state bills. So we'll put a pin in that and we'll answer that at the end. And I am pivoting into our infrastructure work. So first, we're going to talk about complete streets. Complete streets, of course, is the approach to road design that really meets the needs of all users, including people on bikes, people walking, people in wheelchairs, as well as public transit. So that's those streetscapes with well-maintained sidewalks, protected bike lanes, our best practice, and traffic calming measures that keep drivers from speeding, that really, it's a holistic approach that transforms the streets into something that's safer for all users and not just cars. So that's what we're talking about here. And we had SB 5595 in Washington. So Washington State has a complete streets bill on the books, but a lot of what we see with states that have those complete streets bills is that there's the need to strengthen the existing law or fill in particular gaps. And that's exactly what this bill did. This bill was enacted. This adds an operational and legal framework for how people move on streets intentionally shared by drivers, cyclists, and other users. So this is really focusing on these low speed local streets rather than the arterial streets. So that's a good win right there. In New York, we had a couple of different bills and their companions that were aiming to do just that, which is strengthen an existing law on the books and fill in those gaps. So Senate Bill 915 included complete streets and all resurfacing project, and that does similar intent to the Washington bill, is that there's a lot of smaller projects that happen in small towns, less used streets that currently are excluded from complete streets principles. This bill would have merely included those smaller projects into, if it's appropriate, include complete streets principles such as protected bike lanes. And there's a typography for these um, these things where they could be specific to each project. Senate Bill 131, that changed the funding requirements to include more projects. It changed the state and federal funding requirement to an and or, which just broadens the umbrella. Fortunately, neither of those bills passed. I think we saw a little bit with infrastructure. What Matt mentioned earlier is really tight budgets at the state level and states protecting against that. So unfortunately, some of the complete street stuff was victim of that. Wisconsin is an interesting case because I do believe Wisconsin had a complete streets law on the books since 2009. And then in 2015, the governor's office scrapped it. However, municipalities continued onward without the state. So a lot of municipalities have been doing that work just without state support. So this bill for Wisconsin, whose legislative session is still in progress, so we don't know the outcome of this, but we're trying to work with our friends out in Wisconsin to help support the bill. This would require the inclusion of bike and pedestrian infrastructure projects, those protections in those projects. So right now, that's optional, and we can hopefully get that passed this year. And if not, we know it'll be an ongoing effort. Trail access, we had a handful of good wins here, and these are all wins. Massachusetts still in progress, but trail access is about really expanding the responsible off-pavement trail participation with willing and engaged lane managers to help that responsible partnership. So Oregon SB 179, these are rule changes that come from the state legislature to mean e-bikes in three classes are now legal for use on park roads and other trails that allow standard bicycles and addresses the liability associated with that for private and public landowners. HB 2519, I think might be one that we have mentioned. This will be the second time just because it's such a broad bill. So this addresses e-moto and multiple mode e-bike language, and multiple mode e-bikes is sort of an emerging issue, not one we have a lot of language around, but this one did a good job addressing that. And additionally, it established new requirements for the sale, labeling, and disclosure of e-bikes and prohibits the misrepresentation of non-compliant vehicles as e-bikes. So that consumer fraud that Matt mentioned earlier. Arkansas SB 146. This is a recreation liability reform. So the legislature here amended the definition of recreational purpose to now include a broader range of activities, including mountain biking and cycling, thereby affecting property owners with liability for that land made available to the public. The South Dakota SB 79, that is a Class 1 e-bike e-mountain bike access on natural surface trail, and it's really specific to one trail in the state, and that's the George S. Mickelson Trail, which is a cornerstone trail in the state. It's a 109-mile trail that goes through the heart of the Black Hills. It'll be now opened to Class 1 e-mountain bikes, thanks to this bill. And then I mentioned Massachusetts. The legislative session is still in progress, so we are monitoring this one. This one would enable local decision making on trail access for those Class 3 e-bikes. Slow speed and street safety. So I'm going to talk a lot about intelligent speed assistance because that's what a handful of these bills are. And what ISA is, that's vehicle safety technology designed to help drivers comply with speed limits and reduce speeding related crashes. So it uses a combination of technology like GPS, digital maps, cameras, and certain ISA technologies can physically slow down a car, reducing its speed. So these are technologies for problem drivers who have gotten lots of points or lots of speeding tickets who haven't gotten to the point where they're getting their license taken away. But this is really just the stick to make sure that we're making these drivers not make the roads so dangerous for cyclists, pedestrians, and other motorists. That one in New York, Assembly Bill 2299 has unfortunately did not pass this year. We worked hard on it with our partners out there, and we'll continue to push that. We have an ISA bill in Virginia that's very similar. This one, fortunately, has been enacted, which is good progress there. Washington, this is similar, another ISA bill that has been enacted. So those are some good safety wins right there. And in New York City, we have this is not a bill, but a rulemaking process initiated by the Department of Transportation at the urging of the mayor's office. The goal is to impose new speed restrictions on e-bikes, dropping e-bikes, which can currently go, and all cyclists can go the current speed limit, which in most cases is 25 miles per hour, targeting e-bikes and making a restriction of 20 miles per hour for them specifically. So we are opposing this. We think it's arbitrary. We think it's probably not legal. So we are opposing that. We've submitted comments. Matt testified the other day, and we're going to keep our eye on that. There was a hearing, so we'll know what happens in the next month or so. California, we had a handful of bills. We had an ISA pilot bill. These are all in progress. California's legislative session goes till about September 12th, if I remember correctly. Senate Bill 720 is an automatic red light enforcement systems. The idea here is to curtail speeding in a way that promotes equity, transparency, and safety requirements. So reducing those crashes, but also reducing the bias that can come with um, cops pulling folks over. So it's a more stricter cameras around red light running. And then AB 1014 is lower speed limits. This gives municipalities the option to lower speed limits in certain cases, like around schools and other sensitive zones where a lot of different users are interacting. So we're supporting that one. All right. And then we have, so these top funding wins, Vote for Bikes is People for Bikes campaign to support measures that provide investment in expanding bike infrastructure and improving the quality and accessibility of places to ride bikes. So these are supporting ballot initiatives at the state and local level and the things that come before them. Sometimes they need to get past the legislature to reach the ballot. So we support those. 2025 is, of course, running behind 2024. These off-year elections, naturally, a lot fewer initiatives are going to be reaching the ballot, and that means generally less money available for these kind of issues. But we still have had some good wins so far. So far in the first 2 quarters of the year, $232 million of new money approved by voters in these municipalities. Stuff that goes to park levies, to non-motorized um, trails and things of that nature that can be bike related either directly or indirectly. We have a handful that we're watching for the fall, and mostly November, but one in August. So, King County is where Seattle is, Denver, Beaumont, Spokane, Salem. Boise is still TBD. There a lot of times the city council, the legislature has to hammer out how much money they're working on there. So that those will all be ones we'll be supporting for the fall, and then hopefully next year in a major election year we can tee up some more. And sustainability is absolutely an issue area for us, and of course sustainability through infrastructure and direct climate funding is a priority. Bikes and the bikes are a sustainable product, but I think us and our members are aware that there's more that we can do to be sustainable, both in our production and the full life cycle of bikes. So we monitor bills in a few key issue areas. This year we tracked close to 30 sustainability bills. An emerging trend was battery recycling. This is an issue that we've worked really hard on. We've worked with partners to develop call to recycle and a battery recycling program with other partners to ensure lithium-ion batteries are being disposed of properly. So that's sustainability, and the other goal there was to show compliance with potential state laws so that our members who are a part of Call to Recycle are not having to double pay into another program or aren't paying into programs that say deal with other hazardous waste that are not bike related. So that was an emerging trend this year. We only had 2 bills that passed that we're working on. The rest have not passed, but I think next year it's going to be even more. The extended producer responsibility, that issue, creates challenges and opportunities for members, and one that we want to engage on an individual basis to make sure they're not creating undue burdens for our members. None of those bills passed this year or have not passed yet. The PFAS, this is, the state laws are out there increasingly restricting or banning PFAS in consumer products. Other states are simply requiring the disclosure of it. This is one we've been proactive in. I would encourage you all to join the sustainability working group, and we talk more about this. I am going to pivot to Q&A since we're bumping up against time.
Um,
Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. There was one question in the chat I addressed, and sorry for the typing. I should have muted myself there. I normally not a loud typist, but apparently I was pretty excited about that one. There was a question about CPSC battery standards and the federal battery bill that is pending in Congress right now. So I think I have a thorough answer there to that question in the Q&A.
Excellent. And if this is a good time to ask questions if you have any. Do you see that one from Keith?
I do. There's Keith's question: can you please share model e-moto language for states to adopt to regulate out of class electric bicycles? Definitely, we are working on this language. We have a couple bills now where we've worked extensively to get better language. Not quite what we want, but yes, this is one of our short-term projects to really develop a model e-moto definition and regulation approach. We worked in at least 3 states this year, and I think we can anticipate that more states will be interested in doing something in this area.
And you see both of our emails are on this thank you page. And if anything pops up at any time about the issues we talked about today or anything we didn't touch on today, you can email both of us. Let's see. So this is a question from Michelle about banning handheld device usage while driving. These are absolutely bills that we support. There was a bill in Florida this year that we were helping to support with other partners. I don't believe it made it across the finish line. Florida is a state where we have an opportunity. As you saw, there's a bunch of issues that popped up in Florida, and Florida is many, many cyclists, big population, very influential for the rest of the country. This is a place where you have the opportunity in the interim period that we're in right now to work with those partners and lawmakers to support those bills. So we will be working with them during this interim to help support that legislation. Bills blocked by Republican bloc in the House. And there's a couple of specific lawmakers that we need to work on in Florida. And Michelle, if you have ideas, I'd love to connect with you offline and we can strategize around that because, all states should be having these laws. I don't believe the state I'm in has one, or at least it's not enforced, and it makes everything terrifying. I see a question from Mark that I think we can address offline as well. Thanks for that question, Mark. And that goes to a lot of what we've been saying. It's a sustainable product, but we need to do more within the process. So
I
I've
would say thank you, everyone,
yeah,
and keep the questions coming. And you have our contact info, so don't be shy. We'd be happy to hear your concerns and your suggestions for areas where we can help advance cycling, cyclist rights, and sensible cycling legislation.
absolutely. And this is recorded, and we'll share the recording with you all. Thanks for joining. Thanks for that, Matt. And everyone, enjoy the rest of your day.